Greetings. I'm Thomas Caldwell of the Aurelian Column, and this is the Book Report. One of the more interesting books you can read, especially when it comes to history, are books written by heads of state, people who were actually there, heading up things, being leaders of their nations. They got to see things and do things and get insights that they usually don't talk about until many years after they've left office. It's one thing to read a biography of someone. It's another thing to read an account by someone who was not only there when history was being made, but who was actually making history itself. American presidents are known for writing books. Sadly, many of these books are written by ghostwriters. John F. Kennedy's Profiles in Courage, which he wrote prior to entering office, is generally considered to be a ghost-written project. Teddy Roosevelt loved books. He loved reading them. He ripped them to pieces when he was reading them often. And he did write, and he wrote some very interesting things that are even readable by today's standards, but he admitted many times he hated writing. It's just something he had to do, and, well, that was what you had to do back in the day, and you still do. One of the more talented writers, in fact, I think he was the most talented writer who ever sat in the Oval Office, was also one of the most controversial presidents we've ever had, and that is Richard Milhous Nixon. Yes, that guy. When you think of him, you think of the Vietnam War, although he didn't start it. He did his very best to end it the best way he could. He did open up China, for good or for ill. It would have been for good if it was done better with more follow-through from more competent people who followed him. And, of course, Watergate, which compared to the scandals that we have now that aren't even being considered scandals, was nothing. It was a parking ticket compared to a three-man murder of the kinds that we've been seeing in the White House in recent years. Now, like it or not, this man was on the scene in many locations throughout the 20th century. The post-war years especially. He was vice president under Dwight Eisenhower for 8 years. That's nothing to sneeze at. And the book I'm talking about today is one of many that he's written, all of which are good except for his memoirs. That was a real disaster. The book I'm talking about is Leaders by Richard Nixon. Simple title, Leaders. It came out in 1982, was published by Warner Books, which no longer exists, and it's 400 or so pages of some of the most amazing accounts of the post-war years that I think exists anywhere. And I'm sorry to say that it's no longer in print, but we'll get back to that in a second. First, a little bit more about Nixon as a writer. He was once asked in life what he would have been if he had not been president, and he said very quickly and very decisively, I would have loved to have been a sports writer. And he probably would have been a very good one. Now, when his memoirs came out in the late 70s, they were awful. I remember reading them back then, and it was something that took a long time to get through. Fortunately, he was born at the right time and was writing at the right time where a new invention came out, the word processor. Yes. Let's face it, folks, the word processor has made authors out of most of us. A typewriter requires an awful lot of discipline, mental and physical, that most people do not have and never did have. Word processors made it easier, in my view, much for the better, to put your thoughts down. And that's what he did. And he did so magnificently. And this guy started churning out books, the likes of which, well, I think they are the best books ever written by a former American president. And if you didn't like Nixon, tough. The guy knew what he was talking about much of the time. In fact, people I have known in the past who knew him quite well said he was by far the most intelligent man they ever met. Let's go into Leaders for a minute. Richard Nixon, as vice president and as president, met just about everybody and anybody who was at the head of national affairs throughout the latter half of the 20th century, the post-war years. During World War II, he was a naval officer, didn't serve much in combat positions, but he became a politician very early. He was a buddy of John F. Kennedy. They both came into Congress at the same time and were the best of friends and were always in touch with each other. And they were friends up until, well, the 1960 election, which John F. Kennedy, to be fair, did not exactly win. It's a long story there. I'll go into that some other time. Nixon was able to meet people. He was the vice president, the guy that you send off to funerals of heads of state, the ones that get a lot of footwork done, especially for Dwight Eisenhower. He was quite young in the position as well. And of course, he eventually became president in 1968 and opened up China. He did so much. Now, the book Leaders is very straightforward. He has different chapters explaining his history and his insights and some of the background into various leaders of different countries, both adversarial and allied, that he had to deal with. Nikita Khrushchev, one of the most fascinating stories in there is how, and I won't spoil this for you, how he mentioned something about farm animals that obviously upset the Soviet leader to the point where Richard Nixon said you could see the veins sticking out of his head. That must have been something fun to see. He talked about Charles de Gaulle, Winston Churchill. The first encounter he had with him was driving to the White House from the airport during a state visit. It's wonderful history, and it's real history. But for some reason, it's not in print. And that's even more important here because back when his books were coming out, it was theorized that they were so good, so insightful, so approachable, and so readable that they would be standard issue in every university in the United States where political science was being taught. That's not the case, and this is sad. He has some fascinating stories in here, and I'm not going to go into all of them, but he talks about meeting Zhou Enlai, meeting Mao Zedong, meeting the heads of state from Indonesia, Japan. It's all in here. All of Richard Nixon's books, except for his memoirs, are very well written and very approachable and an amazing insight into history. So you can get this book available used in a lot of places. You can get it for $5, $10, $15. Some places are selling the paperbacks for more than $100, which I think is a little bit on the ridiculous side. There's a few online places that seem to have it for borrowing. Archive.org, every time I've gone up there to look at it, it's been taken out. This is a book that should be reissued, at least in Kindle form. Now, I didn't have a chance to go through all of Nixon's books, but some of them are out there in Kindle. I don't know of any that are audiobooks, but again, he's written quite a few, and these books should be out there and should be enjoyed. Leaders is one of the best books if you want to learn about the people who rebuilt the world following World War II. That's the best way to describe this one. It's easy to find if you look for it. Take the time to read it. It's one of those books you want to grab if you can and keep it in your library. Just remember that the best history is written by those that lived it and those who made it. Leaders by Richard Nixon, Warner Books, came out in 1982. You can get it used and try to see if you can find some play to write letters to the current owners of the copyright to see if they can reissue it in at least Kindle form. That's it for today. If you appreciate my work, please like, subscribe, and share. Share with your friends and share with your enemies, even if they don't like Richard Nixon. I can be reached at feedback@aureliancolumn.com. That's feedback@aureliancolumn.com. I'm up on X. My handle there is MICCAMPEN. That's MICCAMPEN. This podcast originates at Substack. My handle there is aureliancolumn.substack.com. Until we meet again, be good, be safe, be vigilant, and remember, keep reading and never judge a book by its movie. Good day.